Tonight we're visiting a glass workshop that works through an endless drizzle. A place where heat and rain meet under a roof of tin and skylights. You'll walk inside, hear the patter on the panes, and watch clear and coloured glass take shape beside the steady breath of the furnace. The Foundry stands at the end of a narrow lane, its brick walls darkened by years of wet seasons, and the steam that escapes whenever the side door opens. A corrugated awning stretches over the threshold, collecting a shallow gutter of water that trickles from one bent corner with a soft, regular drip. Through the fogged windows, you can make out a square of orange light that wavers like a small sunrise, and silhouettes that lean and straighten as they work. There's a bell by the door, but it's never rung, because the latch has a heavy feel that announces every visitor with a deliberate clunk. Inside, the first sensation is warmth moving over your face and hands, uncurling your fingers from the damp evening. A line of rubber mats keeps the floor from turning slick, and beneath them, the old concrete shows a web of hairline cracks that hold tiny threads of soot. To your right is a rack of blowpipes and punty rods, a neat row of steel shafts resting in wooden saddles, ends blackened, smooth with use. To your left sits a steel table called a marver, its surface oiled and slightly scarred, ready to cool and shape fresh gathers of glass. Straight ahead, the furnace door is shut. A square of iron with a round peephole, glowing like a coin held to the sun. And the sound that fills the room is a long, even hush, like a big animal sleeping. Rain taps the skylights in a constant pattern that never quite repeats, and every few minutes a drop finds its way down a joint and falls into a pail with a friendly plink. The pail is there on purpose, placed where the drip lives during the wet months, and a chalk ring on the floor marks where it should sit. The air smells like wet wool near the door, and like warm mineral near the furnace, with a faint taste of soda ash that rides the heat. A wall clock with a clean white face leans slightly to one side, When the furnace roars a little higher, the second hand quivers. By the window, a calico cat naps on a folded blanket, the kind of shop cat that knows the quiet corners and doesn't mind the shuffle of boots. You can hear the cat breathe when the room gets still between steps. The tiniest whistle at the end of each exhale. Along the back wall are plastic bins, labelled in tidy handwriting. Silica, soda, lime, cullet, and a series of jars filled with frit that range from milk white to cobalt so dark it might be black. The handwritten labels shine with a thin film of dust that never seems to go away, no matter how often someone wipes with a damp cloth. The rain doesn't bother any of this. It just keeps time, steady as a metronome that listens but never intrudes. Mara is the first to gather tonight. She's the master here, compact and focused, her hair tied tight under a bandana that's been washed so often the pattern is a soft blur. She slides a blowpipe across the rollers, opens the furnace door, and the room brightens a full shade, as if the rain outside has lifted for a second. Inside the furnace, the crucible holds clear glass at the consistency of honey, small ripples passing over the surface when the door moves. She turns the pipe slowly, dips it in, and lifts with a practiced wrist, catching a small glowing bulb on the end. The glass turns as she turns, staying centered by habit and patience, never tilting enough to slough. The door closes, and a bloom of afterlight hangs in the air before thinning back to the steady orange. On the bench, she rolls the gather on the marva with a soft hush, flattening one side just enough to start a footed form later. The metal squeaks against the rollers as she swings back towards the glory hole, that open-ended furnace where the glass can be reheated without picking up more material. The glow returns, softer this time, and you can feel it brush your face even from where you stand. Beside Mara, the apprentice Eli checks the tools that live on the bench. Jacks with long jaws, diamond shears, wooden blocks soaked in water, paddles wearing dark burn marks like rings on a tree. He has a pencil tucked behind one ear and a habit of counting, always counting, his lips moving as he lays each tool in a line, and then nudges a handle so it sits just right. He wears leather shoes with flat soles that grip the floor, and one shoelace has a knot in the knot, a small lump like a pebble under the bow. Every so often, Eli looks up at the rain and then back to the work, as if the ceiling might comment on his speed. When Mara lays the pipe into the rest, he's already there with the block, steam rising in a clean column as he cups the glowing shape without touching it. The steam makes a soft shh that falls in and out of the rain's rhythm. And for a moment, the room seems to breathe in 2 layers. He nods, sets the block down, picks up the jacks, and tests their spring with the pad of his thumb. A smear of ash marks his cheek, and he forgets it's there, though he will notice it later when someone smiles at him. In the corner by the loading bay stands a table with a metal top and a scattering of moulds. One with ridges for fluted vases, one with a diamond pattern, one with a smooth curve that turns any hot gather into a bell. The moulds smell faintly of wet wood, even when they are dry, and their hinges move with a careful click when someone opens and closes them to check for grit. A rack above the table holds paper patterns cut from heavy stock, each tagged with a clip and a bit of string so they can hang flat. A simple electric kettle shares the corner, ready to fill a thermos, and a white mug with a chipped rim waits on a shelf. Popular because its handle fits 2 fingers exactly. A small fan lifts the corner of a note taped to the wall that says, "Do not set hot punties on the cart." The kind of reminder that has saved that cart many times. On a rainy night, the loading bay door stays shut, but the smell of damp rope hangs there from the coils they use when crates arrive. A stack of corrugated boxes leans slightly toward the door, their edges soft from humidity, and a strip of orange tape from an old shipment has been folded into a tab that no one can bring themselves to tear away. Everything here has a place, but the places look lived in, like a workbench that remembers every hand. Mara brings the pipe to her lips and blows a gentle breath, cheeks barely moving, and a round of glass opens like a small lantern at the end of the metal. The bubble lifts a bit becomes a sphere with a soft wobble, and she rolls it to keep the wobble from choosing a side. Eli measures with his eyes, and then with a wooden caliper, calls out a number over the furnace hush, and she nods once. She cools the neck with a breath from a narrow pipe that blows air right where the glass narrows. A quick stripe of duller colour that marks where it will break later. He brings the paper pattern close to the mother, and the glowing bubble reflects in the paper's smooth face like a tiny second sun. When Mara reheats, Eli twirls the frit tray into position, and tiny chips of colour shine like wet gravel. She dips lightly, rolls once, and the chips stick, melting into the surface as she reheats, turning from sugar-like grains into even skin. You can smell something like warm sand, clean and simple, underneath the wet wool smell that still clings to your jacket from outside. The rain gives 3 heavier taps on the nearest skylight, as if noticing the step you've just watched. Against the far wall is the annealer, a big square kiln with a lid that opens like a chest, and a digital display that counts down the hours of a cooling cycle. The annealer is quiet company, humming in a contented way, keeping finished pieces from slumping or cracking as their insides and outsides learn to agree. Inside, lined shelves hold earlier work. A row of tumblers with pale green walls and a faint spiral of bubbles. A bowl with a thick lip made to feel secure in the hand, and a paperweight holding a net of filigree cane that looks like a frozen swirl of smoke. Someone has placed a coin on the corner of the annealer's lid for luck, a habit that started years ago when the kiln's controller was new. A little digital thermometer sits on top as a double check, because this is the kind of shop that likes 2 ways to be sure. Next to it, a clipboard holds the day's schedule and a list of names with small check boxes marked with pencil. Underneath, a recipe for a gold-pink strike is clipped with a binder that has lost 1 chrome arm. The rain sounds thinner near this wall, filtered by the neighbouring building, so the hum of the annealer makes the larger sound here. You could stand by this kiln and feel yourself settle. the same way you might relax next to a responsible friend who keeps an eye on everything without fuss. A delivery arrives just after 7. The driver lifts the latch with his elbow because his hands grip a crate and his boots knock rain from their treads onto the mat with a dull rhythm. His jacket is the bright yellow kind with reflective strips, and the strips pick up the furnace light in flat flashes as he steps sideways to clear a bench. He says the same thing he always says, which is that the lane is shining like a cooked fish and the van prefers dry weather. And this makes Mara laugh, a short, clean laugh. Eli signs the clipboard with the shop pencil, taps the tip twice to set the lead, and sets the sheet back into the plastic sleeve so no drop will blur it. The driver puts the crate down near the frit bins, checks the label once more, as if the box might disguise itself while he looks away, and leaves a thin trail of water that the mat eats quickly. He waves his hand at the cat, who lifts one ear and decides not to move. When the door closes, a brief draft tucks around your ankles, and then the shop returns to its usual air, as if the room has a way of refilling itself with its own temperature. Mara opens the crate with a careful pry bar that lives on a hook by the clock. Inside are rods of colour, wrapped in brown paper sleeves, each printed with a code that tells you the chemistry and the melt behaviour. She lifts a sleeve, slides a rod into the light, and a calm stripe of robin's egg blue smiles up at the ceiling. She sets it next to a rod that looks like plain white, but will strike to a soft pink if treated gently. The old gold recipe that needs a specific kind of heat and time. Eli turns one in his hands like a baton, feeling for hairline cracks with a thumbnail, because a cracked rod can pop when it meets the heat. The paper sleeves go to a box marked clean paper, because the shop prefers to reuse anything clean and flat. The crate's metal clips get bent straight and saved in a jar that used to hold instant coffee. And even the wood spaces slide onto a shelf marked blocks someday. This habit of keeping is not clutter here. It's a quiet faith that tools will ask for something at the right moment. The rain approves by turning up its volume for a measured minute. as if the roof has been given more to say. They move to a new piece, a pressed form meant to catch the rainy light on a windowsill. Mara gathers clear, smaller this time, and Eli lifts the hinged mould onto the table, its two halves meeting with a clean kiss. He wets the interior once, sets it back open, and the steam climbs in a neat transparent rope that vanishes before it hits the skylight. She drops the glowing glass into the mould, and the room hears the soft thunk of hot meeting wood, the sound neat and complete. Eli closes the mould, locks the latch, and Mara blows, a short push that fills the ribs and corners until the piece takes the mould's memory. They hold for a count together. You can see their shoulders match, and then they open, and the glass sits there, perfect, and ready for a reheating pass to smooth the seam. The mould leaves precise lines like rain channels on sand, and the glass cools just enough to show them as faint texture. She reheats, turns, and Eli uses the jacks to start the neck, the blades sliding in with the exact pressure that makes the glass listen. The form will become a jar, lid to be ground later at the cold shop, but right now it is only a clean possibility that glows from within. The cold shop is a smaller room off the main floor, its doorway edged with plastic strips to keep the spray from wandering. Inside are diamond wheels that turn with a quiet, watery rasp, and a constant drip that keeps the glass cool while it's ground to a flat rim. On a shelf lives a stack of felt pads for polishing, next to a shallow tray of Syrian oxide that looks like pale mud but makes edges shine. A foot switch controls the water so that hands are free, and a little lamp leans over the work area, like a gardener watching seedlings. There's a window here that faces the alley, and the alley tonight is a long, reflective stripe, with umbrellas moving like slow beetles. Someone taped a leaf to the window last fall, the pattern of its veins pressed flat, because it reminded them of a cane bundle they once made. The cold shop has a quieter heat, more from motors than from flames. So when you step back into the main room, the furnace air feels like a friend's laugh. The cat sometimes sits at the cold shop threshold, tail tucked around toes, watching the drip that never stops. Hypnotized, but never tempted to touch. Back on the floor, a visitor stands by the safe line. Yellow tape that marks where to watch but not step, and holds a tote bag close to her chest. She has come in out of the rain and found herself warming without thinking, cheeks giving back the colour that the drizzle took. The visitor's eyes move from the glow to the tools to the glow again, steady and slow. The way people look at the sea. Eli nods hello, keeps one eye on the pipe, and in the next breath is at the bench, with the wooden paddle to set a flat bottom on the jar. Mara heats the lip and guides the jacks in with a sure, calm motion that opens the mouth. And the phrase, nice and even, escapes from someone's throat. It might be yours. The visitor's umbrella drips into a stand by the door, a small lake forming around the tips. She takes a step closer, stays behind the line, and smiles when the cat stretches one back leg very long and then tucks it back under. A quick run into the lair, and the jar rests in the annealer on a fibred shelf that leaves no mark. Mara closes the lid, checks the controller, and writes the time on the clipboard in clear, square numbers. Eli begins to sweep glass threads from the floor with a soft broom. Not because the threads are sharp, they are, but because he likes the fresh slate feeling that a clean floor gives to the next piece. He sweeps toward a metal pan that holds all the small bits they call stringers and commas, fragments that sometimes get remelted into paperweights, or laid into a platter as a trail. The broom's bristles make a whispery stripe on the rubber mat, and a little line of steam rises where a wet boot print meets the warm floor. The rain comes down a shade heavier, and the downspout decides to sing for a few seconds. A hollow glug that sounds like someone drinking too quickly. The clock's minute hand slides forward, and the second hand settles back into its reliable circle, unbothered by the shift in light. They turn to colour work next. A small vase lined in blue, with a clear shell on the outside. Mara gathers clear, blows a small bubble, and then sleeves it into a preheated cup of opaque blue that Eli has prepared on a punty. The join is quick and precise. The heat fuses the two with a soft blur that vanishes as the piece warms in the glory hole. The colour shows only as a hint against the bright glow, like a lake under thin ice. But when she rolls on the marva, the blue flashes true at the rim. Eli brings a bit of clear to overlay, a thin gather called a collar, and the layer snaps into place. A perfect ring that will stretch into the body as the vase opens. The jacks mark a shoulder line, and the shape begins to tell you what it wants to be. Taller than wide, with a slight belly, and a lip that turns back just enough to catch light. It's not language, but it is communication. The kind that happens between hand and heat and weight. The rain cannot interrupt that. It can only be the steady drummer in the next room. Across from the furnace is the cane warmer, a shallow box with an open top and a bed of sand that cradles rods of striped glass. Tonight the canes are white on clear, simple and crisp, warmed so they won't shock when picked up. Eli lays a few on the marva in a neat row and fuses them to a fresh gather, like fingers pressed into warm wax. He rolls until they sink in level, then heats so they can be twisted just a little. A slow turn that creates a gentle spiral. Mara watches the stripes climb the bubble as she blows. Not hurried, not slow. Breathing the way she always breathes when the pattern must stay even. The lines straighten again as she rolls on the table, the twist becoming an internal memory rather than a visible spin. When the piece hangs at the end of the pipe like a droplet, they both know the exact weight that means it's ready to transfer. Eli brings the punty, a clean steel rod with a small button of glass, touches it to the base, and it sticks with a quick kiss, ready for the break and the opening that will make the mouth. They shear the piece from the blowpipe with a sharp ping that the rain cannot swallow. A clean sound that bounces off the concrete and disappears before it hits the ceiling. Now the mouth faces out, and Mara heats the lip and invites it to open, touching only with heat and gravity and the soft push of the jacks. The lip turns into a circle that satisfies the eye in a way that a perfect circle always does. And a slight flare at the rim catches the room's light. Eli shields the body with a damp newspaper pad when the heat licks close, the water held by the paper turning to steam that smells faintly like toast. With a turn of the rod, the mouth evens, and then another small flame at the torch polishes a tiny seed mark that would have felt rough on a thumb. Into the annealer it goes, the blue now visible as a thin, smooth layer inside the clear. The door closes, and the digital display resumes its steady numbers, as indifferent to praise as a metronome. The rain opens a different register, a softer patter as the wind changes, and a pigeon on the neighbouring roof fluffs itself under the eave, where the drip is least. You can see the bird through the high window above the annealer. A round grey shoulder, a neat eye, a small patience. It pecks once, then settles again, head tucked. The same motion you've seen 1,000 times, that still seems very specific when it belongs to one creature. The cat does not notice, because the cat's dream is deeper now. Paws making a tiny running effort against the blanket, a habit that makes Eli smile every time. On the lane, a bicycle rattles past, and the rattle is nearly swallowed by the roof, but not quite. A van door slides open and closed, and the person who owns the van laughs at something you can't hear. All this is part of the Foundry's night, as natural as the furnace's breathing and the kiln's hum. The rain is the ceiling to these small events, a low roof that keeps them close. Between pieces, Mara checks the furnace through the peephole. Inside, the crucible is still full, the surface level even, the flame washing over it with a steady lick. She makes a note on a clipboard about batch addition in the morning, the amount of cullet to feed, the hour to drop the temperature for a cleaning. Eli wipes the marva with an oiled cloth in calm strokes that smell like a tin of old tools. He turns the blowpipes so their ends cool evenly, and taps out a single tiny piece of clinker that would snag a gather if it stayed. They both drink water from dented bottles that live on a shelf out of the way of heat, and each sets the bottle down without a sound, a habit learned over years of not startling a delicate moment. The clock hand moves again, and the shop returns to its position, like a stage taking its mark for the next scene. Now they choose to cast a thick tile, something simple that holds bubbles like rain caught forever. Eli places a steel frame on the casting table, dusts it with a breath of silica so it will release cleanly, and warms it with a torch until a faint blush appears. Mara gathers heavy, once, twice, then a third time, the weight pulling her shoulders into a curve that the body knows. She walks the gather to the table, turns the pipe so the weight sits centered, and lowers until the glass kisses the frame and spreads. The tile settles, a round that becomes a square as the edges meet the steel, and bubbles line up like small coins just under the surface. Eli sprinkles a light trail of white frit across one corner, a suggestion of drift, and the grains melt in with a soft fade. They move the tile with steady hands onto a rolling cart that knows its path. The annealer lid is open and ready. When it is inside and the lid closes, you can still see a faint rectangle of brighter glow under the seam, as if the tile wants to show off for a minute longer. A short while later, the umbrella maker from 2 doors down slides in under the awning, hangs her damp coat on the stand, and brings 3 dried plums in a paper twist for the shared jar. She checks on the jar she commissioned last week, the one with the soft grey body and a lid meant to keep tea dry. Mara shows her the cooling schedule written on the clipboard, points to the morning hour when they can open the annealer for inspection, and the umbrella maker nods with satisfaction. She runs her hand over the first jar from tonight through the fibre lid, not touching the glass, just feeling the heat that always surprises people who think of glass as cold. She says the rain is good for business, and also the rain is hard on fabric, and then she laughs at her own contradiction. The plums go into the jar by the kettle, which now holds peppermints, safety pins, a spare wingnut, and 12 wood screws that have no clear future yet. She waves goodbye, calls to the cat by name, and the cat blinks but does not wake.